Hi, I'm Rajneesh.
And I'm Bridget,
Welcome to Terra Science.
the podcast where reality matters.
Well, here we have today, it's a pleasure to have Harold McGee with us. He's a very well known author and one of my favorite people as well, and an author. I met Harold many years ago when I was just starting to think about starting an app to solve the food chain problem. And Harold has been an advisor and a mentor to me since then. And it's just exciting to have him on the podcast. I just wanted to mention some of the work that Harold has done. He's a James Beard Award winning author, and he's written several books. Um, uh, the first one was on food and cooking, which is right here, on food and cooking, and then The Curious Cook and Keys to Good Cooking, and then the most recent one is Nosedive, which we will talk about.
Yes, so
So,
super exciting.
yes, it's very exciting. And just before we get started, Harold, would you like to share something about your, writing and your.
First of all, it's wonderful to be with you, Rajneesh and Bridget. Great pleasure. We don't see each other as often as we used to, and so it's nice to get back together. So let's see, myself. Well, I started out life being interested in astronomy and went to school studying physics and astronomy and ended up a few years later getting a graduate degree in literature. So I'll spare you the details, but I've always been interested in both, in science and in what we make of science as human beings. And again, long story short, I went from teaching literature to writing about the science of food and cooking back in the 1970s, and was very lucky in the fact that back then cooking wasn't as big a deal as it is now. So I was able to kind of catch the wave of interest in food and cooking and have been writing about food and cooking ever since. The science behind the transformations that we make in the kitchen. And then a few years ago, I got especially interested in flavor. And then in that particular aspect of flavor that we experience through the nose, aromas and smells and so on. And that led me down a rabbit hole of learning not just about the smells of food and drink, but the smells of the world. And so that's what my last book was about, the aromas of the planet. And so that's it. I'm still mostly focused on food and drink, but this last project really opened my eyes and my nose to a lot of other things.
Well, and I've both Bridget and I have read the book, and I, think it's really, as it says, it really is truly a field guide to smells. I think learning about smells and the nature of smell is so important in terms of being able to become one or understanding how our environment, how we interact with our environment. So maybe we can talk a
Right.
little bit about the nature of smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, what I ended up realizing after, getting partway into this is that, our immediate experience is dominated for most of us by sight and hearing. But in fact, both of those senses are very indirect. We're seeing reflected light. We're hearing pressure waves in the atmosphere. But in the case of smell, we're actually detecting little bits of the world around us, little, um, uh, molecules from the materials themselves. And those molecules, which are light enough and small enough to fly through the air, can end up inside our nose where our olfactory receptors detect their presence and actually in that process of detection, that molecule momentarily is bound to us. It becomes part of us. So it's this incredibly intimate encounter that we have with the things of the world around us. And I simply hadn't appreciated that fact until I really began to look at it. And then to me, it's just become as miraculous a sense as sight and hearing to know that we can encounter the things in the world around us in that way.
Yeah. And just when I was reading your book and just listening to you right now, I really love how descriptive you are because it is technical information, but you add like a very interesting way of describing it that you visualize, the molecules entering and hitting those receptors, right? One of the things you said was how smell reveals invisible, intangible details of the world, and as you were just saying, it stimulates certain like intense feelings and thoughts and brings you back to certain places or memories. And that's something that, as you're reading the book, you kind of think of your own experiences as well and you're learning more. So I think you did a really fantastic job of packaging and teaching us through all that writing as well.
Well, thank you, Bridget. It's for me, the getting back to my training, I realized once I started studying astronomy was that I really wasn't interested in the details of what's going on in the atmosphere of a star millions and millions of light years away, but the very fact that we can think about those things is what interested me. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I always do try to ground the scientific details in the question, what does it mean for us as
Right.
living, breathing human beings?
Yeah. And how do you create the interest for more people to care as well when you don't have all the technical terminology and understanding to make sense of it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one part that really I found fascinating, which is I think we all know, but we don't think about it, is the molecules that we are talking about. They go all the way back to the Big Bang. And so the universe, we're connected to the universe in such a way with the same carbons and the oxygens and the hydrogens and the helium. I think right in this book, it really brings forth that connectedness, because many times we hear physicists talk about that we are actually made from stars. But it's not just made from stars. We are in space, and we are smelling molecules that are creation of the universe.
Yeah, that's again where my astronomy background kind of jumped into my current project. So I'm writing about the smells of planet Earth, but then it occurred to me to ask, well, if we had been present at the beginning of the universe with the nose that we have here on Earth, when would we have begun to notice familiar smells? And
Right.
at first, I thought that's kind of a stupid question, but let's just go check and see. And it turns out that radio astronomers are able to detect molecules in deep interstellar space, and they can identify them. And
Wow.
it turns out that some of the molecules that are very familiar to us here on Earth, like the smell of a cooked egg or the smell of an overripe cheese, are actually out there in interstellar space.
It's amazing.
Which, yeah, to me, it's that's of zero practical value, but I think it changes the way you think about life.
Right.
Totally.
Well, one day when we are flying on rockets to go to Mars, we'll probably know what this space might smell like on the way.
Well, yeah, you would. I don't think we want to stick our head out the
No.
window and take a breath, but
Right. No, but it's really puts molecules and the nature of smell into larger perspective, and connects. It's a really good way to connect us to the universe, which we are learning more and more as we start to deal with challenges on our own planet, that how connected we are along. And then the other interesting aspect is the similarities between smells,
Right.
because they're all the same molecules. So, like I think you mentioned that Sauvignon Blanc may smell like cat pee.
That's right. Yeah, once you get down to identifying the particular molecules that are responsible for particular smells, and that's how we distinguish different materials, is by the fact that they have different molecules, and those different molecules stimulate our receptors in different ways, so we're able to tell one from another. But then you find that uh, even though the world of smells, the osmocosm, as I like to call it, is huge, there are these amazing connections and echoes because different organisms or different situations will give rise to the same molecule for different reasons. And so, yeah, in certain wines, you can find the same molecule that makes male cat pee in particular
Right.
Wow.
as stinky as it is.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really fascinating, and smell is really, we've been around smelling things for a very long time, going back even to our cave experiences, and we used to look for maybe a smell to tell us about danger, or how to prevent certain situations and things like that. We don't have to do that too much anymore.
That's right. Although it is still important. So,
Hmm.
we've had to deal with COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the symptoms, common symptoms of COVID, is the loss of the sense of smell. And that's
Hmm.
actually highlighted the fact
Right.
that in certain situations, we really do depend on smell to detect danger, even though it's, you know, technological danger.
Right.
But we have many of us have gas stoves, and
Right.
sometimes if the
Yes.
ignition on that stove doesn't work, then gas ends up pouring into your kitchen uncombusted. And
Right.
in order for us to know that that's the fact, uh, the gas suppliers dope the gas with a very stinky sulfur molecule so that we'll notice that there's something off. But people who have COVID have not been able to rely on that, and
Right.
there are a handful of anecdotal stories from the last year or two about people who have been saved at the last minute by people who weren't ill coming to their house and opening the door and smelling
Oh,
gas.
wow. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
that's scary. Well, I mean, so smells, as we can see, are one part is to be able to smell things and tell whether they tell us about danger or other things. But then there is a whole another world where organisms create smells. Plants
Hmm.
will take light, do photosynthesis, and spend a lot of time and effort and energy to make smells.
yeah, yeah. For me, plants are the heroes of
Right.
of the osmocosm because, as you say, they're the creatures on our planet that have figured out how to take advantage of solar energy and the commonness of carbon in the atmosphere and turn those resources into just a tremendous range of aromas. They've had billions of years to work on it, and they've got all the energy in the world and plenty of carbon. So the same resources that go into making a huge tree have also gone into making these invisible molecules that give us such pleasure for the most part. They're often made by the plants actually in order to deter predators because, of course, plants are stuck in one place. They can't run
Hmm.
away from insects or hungry animals. So they devote themselves to chemical warfare, essentially, to defend themselves. But we have figured out ways not to be bothered by that warfare, and in fact, ways to take great pleasure in it. So, the herbs and spices like thyme and rosemary and
Mm-hmm.
turmeric and so on, they have the strong characteristic flavors they do in order to deter animals from bothering them. But if we take them and add just a pinch to a stew, uh, we can enjoy the sensory effect, the smell, without having to worry about the biological effects. And then it turns out that our bodies have evolved as well, and often those biological effects are positive rather than negative. So
Right.
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it's a wonderful story of adaptation and cooperation and
Right.
competition, and ending up with this wonderful web of relationships. And yeah, plants are the best.
Yeah.
It really,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, it really is amazing just how over so much time, all the cooperation that is needed to allow plants and insects and, everything to interact and help each other, but also get what they need out of it, especially plants which are stationary and they still are able to work with the world around them in such a fascinating way. I do think it's
Yeah,
really
one
cool.
one
Yeah.
story that stands out along the lines of what Bridget was also saying. I think you mentioned there that a caterpillar, when it's taking a bite off of a thyme leaf, or it's got a mouthful, and so there's a whole lot of that in the caterpillar's mouth. Whereas when we are using it as an herb, it's a tiny pinch of it. So that's a exaggerated effect. But then at the same time, I think it's also fascinating that these interrelationships have occurred so many times that it actually impacted evolutionarily the path of insects, for example, to become dependent on nectars and dependent on the smells to find the specific flowers that they seek to get their energy as well. So plants have, in a way, trained the animals and the insects and also humans to some extent. As Michael Pollan would say that we grow corn everywhere, so we are more being trained rather than, so it's amazing how effective that plan has been from the plant side.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful way of thinking about agriculture is that we've domesticated plants that mean something to us, that either nourish us or give us pleasure. Pleasure in the case of not only herbs and spices, but flowers, as you say. I mean, roses, the aroma of a rose is an amazing thing too. And of course, it's used in cooking in some parts of
Mm-hmm.
the world. But we come to appreciate particular species for particular qualities that we value, and then we domesticate them and we take care of them and we baby them and give them everything they need. And yeah, if you step back, well, the plant has is taking advantage of us rather than the other way
Yes,
around.
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah.
I think that is super interesting. However, then there's the catch where we don't know what we're doing necessarily. So a lot of agriculture isn't always beneficial in the long run with soil health. In that case, where we're still learning, how do we best take care of, the plants that we want as well. And sometimes the soil is a consequence of that. We want to now move that towards replenishing the soil as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly right. We tend to do things as easily as possible, and
Yeah.
sometimes in the initial phases it kind of makes sense. You just take a cutting from a plant and stick it in the ground a few feet away, and that works. But then when it becomes something where you're trying to take care of millions of people or billions of people, then the consequences are more drastic.
Hmm.
And that's a good way to think about microbes, and their role in soils. And Of course, microbes have also many interesting ways of creating smells and doing biochemistry. And so, just anyone walking in the very early morning and the first dew on the fresh grass or the cut off of the fresh cut grass, there are lots of things that we associate with soil and our surroundings, including agriculture. So now we start to think more about microbes, and I think it's really important to start thinking about soil health in that way, and we do a lot. But I also feel that we need to also think about plant health and microbial health. Soil health is linked to that. So I think in your book you also talk about microbes. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that.
Yes, of course, everything started with microbes,
Right.
and and they still dominate the planet as far as I understand.
Right.
Um, and yeah, it's and connecting them with the soil. You know, you can go back 2,000 years to Pliny writing in his encyclopedia, his natural history, uh, that you can tell which soils are going to be the best to plant in by their smell. So,
Mm-hmm.
you dig into them and you get this sweet aroma that you know is going to be right. And of course, that aroma has to come from something, and rocks, minerals don't have smells.
Yeah.
So that sweet aroma is the sign of biological activity, and
Right.
it's microbes. It's
Yes.
bacteria and archaea and fungi, all again in this amazing web of relationships that have developed over the billions of years that the land has existed as land, and that makes the soil a hospitable and nourishing place for plants.
And that's something, I feel that we have sort of lost perhaps because of our using approaches that increase yield, and also the longer distances that the food has to travel before it gets to our plates. So the smells that are fresh in locally grown foods, and I think we become a little bit more distant from that, unfortunately, over uh, our need. And actually, there's nothing wrong with it to get food from different places and internationally things that we can get. And I don't think we can ever go back. But maybe it's time to start thinking, as we start to think about soil health, to go back to a little bit more local economies and local farming and local, seasonal things that we can grow.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I've loved for decades now, ever since I had the chance, I've loved gardening.
Yeah,
And I have a vegetable garden and at this point now a flower garden, because I didn't used to be interested in flowers until I began to learn about their scents. Now I appreciate them in in a way that I didn't before. But there's just nothing like going out on a weekend and just pulling weeds and
correct.
getting the smell of the soil of the plants themselves. As as you break into the leaves, they give off a very characteristic aroma, which has a fascinating story behind it. And I think it's true that we've much of much of us in the modern world have become so removed from those very elemental experiences that we don't even think about them when we go to the store and buy something. So it's even having a plant growing in the windowsill,
Right.
a little basil plant to
Yes.
in the wintertime to put on your salad, can bring back that kind of fundamental fact that we depend on plants, and plants depend on the soil, and the soil is affected by everything that goes on around and in it. That again is a web of relationships that we need to
Yeah.
be more aware of.
Do
Right.
you compost at all? with your
Yes,
garden?
yes.
Yeah,
I've got not one compost bin, but two, because
amazing. Yeah.
everything, all our kitchen scraps go into
Hmm.
that, and that's again a wonderful kind of transformation. You know,
Right.
you start out, you collect the stuff in your kitchen for a few days, and it's not very nice, and you take it
Doesn't
out.
smell good.
Yeah, it stinks. Gets sour
Yeah.
in particular. And then you put it in your compost, and then a month or two later, you're digging out from the bottom of the pile, and it has this wonderful, wonderful aroma.
Right.
The kind of aroma that Pliny
Yeah.
was describing 2,000 years ago.
And heat as well. Like the
Hmm.
as it's building, it gets so hot in there and
Yeah,
lots of smells.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, I think, one of the things we can encourage people to try and do more of,
Hmm.
even if, like you say, a basil plant in the window. And that was really also the early, my thoughts for starting this TerraLocal application, which is free. So there's by no means is like an ad or anything. It's a platform where we try to show where food is being grown, and also in some way how it is being grown, because farmers can also get soil amendments, and local farmers. So one of the things that I realized that we needed to do was to bring a pull, which is consumers and restaurants being able to connect to the local farmers, so that their economy can benefit from this effort that they're making locally. I know we will never become a completely local based society again, but I think if we think about soil health and our own health, it is something, uh, a good thing to move towards in the future. And we can use digital tools like TerraLocal, which will be coming online soon.
yeah. No, that's it's a wonderful project, and kind of mirrors what we've been talking about. You know, it's a way to a way for people like us, for people who eat and drink to live, to tap into this web of relationships that have been developing for billions of years. And you know, we our current relationship with that web is through the foods we eat, and so being in a closer relationship with the people who are actually out there tending the plants and tending the soil can only be better for everything.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been a really fascinating discussion. Just before we close, though, but I just wanted to ask if you were working on another project, and if you would like to tell us anything about that, or keep it as a surprise.
Well, I can say that I'm moving back into food and drink,
Okay,
having taken this detour into the universe or the osmocosm. I am moving back to food and drink,
great.
and yeah, yeah, it won't be another 10-year project. That I can
Wow.
guarantee.
Yeah. So Nosedive took you 10 years. This
Yes,
one?
yeah.
Wow.
Be-
Yeah, I believe it. It's a it's a strong one.
No,
Yes.
it's a great read, and it's not something that you only read once. I can say that for sure, because it's almost it's like a reference book as well. So many times
Yeah.
when I've read things about the smell, I want to go back and review again, because it's such an amazing connection that it makes to things that I wouldn't think of myself.
Well,
So
that's what I really hoped for. I didn't intend for people to read it cover to cover like a novel, uh, but it is meant as a reference, exactly as you say, to so that you're out for a walk and you know there's a little bit of rain, as there has been this weekend,
right,
and you smell that characteristic smell of the early stages of a rainstorm, and you get curious as to why that smell is there. I hope
Hmm.
you go into Nosedive and read a couple of
Yeah.
paragraphs.
It's
great,
amazing.
yeah. Thank you so much, Harold, and
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you in person sometime very soon.
Yeah.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Thank you so much, Harold. It's been really great to get to chat to you as well. And thank you guys for listening. Please be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.